As you know, last week, Natalie did an amazing job of informing us and about the Lunar New Year, the Chinese New Year, and I think everyone learned a little thing. I hope everyone who is celebrating had a great weekend and lots to eat. Um, so the next thing that I wanted to take on this month and share was Black History Month, and as you know, 2020 was a very difficult time for the Black community across North America. You know, there was a lot of there was some wonderful things in terms of everybody standing up for the systemic racism that has been going on, particularly towards the Black community by the police. And I think, I, for one, who while I might have a certain empathy around divisiveness because of my Jewish heritage, there's no way I could ever understand truly what it means from those in the Black community of what they have to endure. But the wonderful thing about our company is because of our diversity, because of our respect, because of the nature of the company that I've always wanted to build of treating everybody equal and really making everyone recognize that, if we don't understand, it's our responsibility to become informed. I've taken the initiative to ask Kwami and George to share their perspective and the importance of Black History Month from them. And the nice thing is we get one from a US perspective and we'll get one from a Canadian perspective. So this is the first of our two-part series to celebrate and recognize Black History Month. And I will pass it over to Kwame for his moment in the spotlight. Okay, Kwame?
Appreciate it, Adam. For everybody on the call, good morning. Adam hit it on the head. Last week, Natalie did such a great job on presenting the Chinese New Year. I kind of reflected and said, what did I really want to present to the group? And I wanted to get 3 points out. And one was to educate, 2 to inform, and 3 to make it as personal as possible. Because what I'd really like for everybody to get out of this, not only as a group, as an individual, some of the things from my childhood to a young adult to where I am today, things that have maybe gone forward and things that at times have taken maybe a few steps back. But hopefully these slides and these images will strike you in a way to make you think a different perspective, and then also open discussions moving forward. For Black History Month, I use the word yes, sir, and I use sir as an acronym. Growing up as a kid, I was a military kid, so to be respectful to my dad and my parents and my grandparents and those that are elderly, it would be yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And this acronym to me stands for struggle, inequality, and respect. And to even take a step further back, when I think about the history books of slavery, Civil War, and people using the word master, it really was such a disconnect as me for a kid, because think about as a kid, if your mom or your dad asked you to do something and you responded with master, it just doesn't connect. So hopefully these slides and these images will give you some reflection of how I grew up and where we are today. February is Black History Month. This month-long observance in the US and Canada is a chance to celebrate Black achievement. This year, it also follows a tumultuous period where racial justice calls reached a fever pitch, providing a fresh reminder to take stock of where systemic racism persists and give visibility to the people and organizations creating that change. Carter G. Woodson, I'm going to talk about him a little bit later, but I just want to read this quote. Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which come from the teachings of biography and history. John Mercer Langston, the first Black man to become a lawyer in 1854, and in 1855, one of the first African Americans ever elected to public office in the US. The 1908 race riots in Springfield, Illinois helped spur and form the NAACP, which stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Jack Johnson, something I really didn't know until I started doing a little research, became the first African-American man to hold the World Heavyweight Championship until 1915. And then once again, Carter G. Woodson. The celebration of Black History Month began as Negro History Week. Created in 1926, a noted African-American historian, scholar, educator, and publisher. It only became a month-long celebration in 1976, 50 years after Carter G. Woodson asked for Black achievement to be recognized. While Rosa Parks is credited with the help to spark the civil rights movement, the Montgomery bus boycott, Claudette Colvin was actually arrested 9 months prior, not giving up her bus seat to white passengers as well. The reason I show these images is as a kid, when I look at somebody back in the 1800s as a lawyer, somebody as a champion within a sport, somebody who just wanted to sit down on a bus, it really befuddled me, because when I see somebody in a suit, when I see these achievements that we all live for today and that we recognize at the highest level, it really was a disconnect for me as a kid to understand why a person, a society, or a group would think of the African American as a second-class citizen. So I wanted to show my family's journey and really point out, no matter what the obstacle, you can persevere and always believe in yourself. This is a picture of my dad, aunts, uncle, and my grandparents working in the cotton field of Corpus Christi in 1954. When my dad first showed me this picture, I actually started to chuckle and said, "Dad, why are you messing with me?" And why I said that is when you think about some of the stories when somebody says, "Hey, when I was your age, I trucked in the snow to school for 6 miles," or "I did this," or "I did that," I really thought he was just trying to mess with me. And then when I realized that it was a picture of my family, there was a part of me inside that was angry, because for me as a kid, I saw these images in history books of slavery, African Americans coming over the boat, the Civil War. And it was such a disconnect for me that I said, I have my dad that actually worked in these fields at 10 years old. My grandmother, who had a business degree, but no one would hire her for an office job, where she grew up in Waxahachie, Texas. Thinking about my dad at 10 years old and what I was doing at 10 years old at his age. And it was something that first, right or wrong, really gave me a disgust of Texas, somewhere where I didn't want to be or be a part of. But then I had to reflect and realize that there's a lot of good people in Texas, and that it was a time of change and of reflection, and to identify it and to figure out where I was going to move forward. And to also understand where my dad was as well. With that being said, my dad made a promise to himself that his family would have a much better life growing up. So at 17, which still blows me away, he decided that instead of working in the cotton fields, that he was going to sacrifice his life and possibly die in war to better position himself so when he had the chance to have a family, that he would start on a better foot and have his family do the same. So in 1961, he enlisted in the Navy and deployed to war soon after. And one thing I found out in high school in a paper that I wrote called "Tell Me Something I Don't Know," I found out in high school that my dad was a part of the Black Panther movement after returning from the Vietnam War. And part of this movement was some of the disgust that he had in participating and being forced to drop napalm and part of the Agent Orange, and really wanted to get justice for African Americans as they move forward in the 60s and 70s. And one thing that was touching to me is a lot of times when you're a kid, you don't know what your dad or your mom does, but they put food on the plate, They give you clothes. They try and give you the best education. But I found out over time that my dad was known in the Bay Area as leading some of the largest negotiation deals for one of the largest transportation companies in the United States. And I'm just going to read the last two bullet points. One of the nastiest Bay Area strikes in recent memory. It was settled in the pre-dawn Saturday after the intervention of big stick labor leaders and increasing pressure from a growing number of politicians. A quote from my dad. "These are the toughest negotiations I've ever had," said Chief BART negotiator Howard Lewis. "But when you have both sides ready to win, you can do creative things." When I saw this quote, it made me think about today in the US with bipartisan and to better understand both sides and to have both sides win, but to ultimately have society as a whole win and move forward. My parents both preached, when you first meet someone, never judge them until you truly know who they are for yourself. Don't let one bad apple corrupt or stain a group or a race. This was crucial because for me, both my parents grew up in Texas, but in different sides, but ultimately met in California. And they both wanted to look out for a better life and then ultimately joined in marriage. There's probably about a handful of people in this company that knew at one time in my professional life I went by the name of Kevin, but a lot of people don't understand or know the story, so I'm going to share it with you. My first sales job, I was in college working on my computer science degree, and I wanted a little change. And so one of my friends said, "You should go into sales." And I was like, "What sales?" He's like, "You have the personality." He said, "You've got the mindset and you know people." And he said, "I think you might be really good at it." So I joined a company called Petrolon that had a product called Slick 50 and eventually was purchased by Quaker State Oil. But when I went to the Southeast, the first thing that resonated with me was the Deep South. So people that had the names like Dwayne or Bubba thought about racism, and I was like, why did they give me this territory? And they wanted to prove, to see, one, how tough my skin was, but then they also gave me a power that I wasn't really attuned to until I realized, being a part of this racing industry, they gave me the ability to support and authorize independent racers. Being able to cut a check in my 20s for 5,000, 50,000, 150,000 for racers that we thought were going to represent their regions. And so when I'd first go in and say, "Hey, this is Kwami," they'd be like, "Who, what, where?" And after a few months, I got frustrated. And one of my friends said, "You know what? I've got a name for you." And out of frustration, I said, "I already have an effing name." He goes, "No, we're going to use the code for you. It's Kevin." And I laughed and I said, "What's Kevin stand for?" He goes, "For these backwards ass people down here, Kevin stands for kills every victim in necessity." Because when you go out there and when you close your deals and they start spending money for us, you're going to be successful. And moving forward, it doesn't matter what your name is because you know who you are. A few months later, I was part of a team where we landed our first $1 million Walmart deal and ultimately went from an $8 million company to a $130 million company within 2.5 years. Kwami, my birth name, in honor of my mom. August 26, 2017 was a tough time. Not only was it 10 days after my birthday, but it was actually 4 days before my parents were going to celebrate their 50th anniversary. The reason I have the executive team on here is because when I first met Raj, it was ultimately on the client side. I worked with Patrick and his team with Asking Canadians when I worked with Scent, not really knowing what my future is. But as I grew over time, meeting Raj, Adam, Steve, Suzanne, it really told me that, these are good people, and working with them, I said, this is a great culture. And all my times traveling to Toronto, I said, this is such a beautiful city, so diverse, and the energy started to align. And when ultimately the executive team decided that I would make a great fit, I knew that I was moving in the right direction. And then to honor my mom, I eliminated Kevin and brought back Kwami. Kwami was something that all my friends and close business partners were aware of, but really, I wanted to incorporate that name to show not only was I a part of a great company, culturally wise, and just good people, but just moving forward the legacy for my kids to understand to truly be who they are. Before I go into the next slide, I'm going to talk about white privilege. As a kid, white privilege to me is if somebody said, hey, if I was in the grocery store, standing in line, waiting to grab some meat from the butcher, and there was a white man or a white woman next to me, and the butcher turned around, instead of him saying, who can I help? He would go straight to that person and say, can I help you, ma'am or madam? And totally disregard me. In a grocery store or shopping, picking out clothes, I could be 20, 30 feet away from the alarm that triggers and goes off, but all eyes stand on me, wondering if I was the person that took something. And then as a high school kid, first driving, I remember a car of 4 white guys passing with the music blaring, passing me by, probably doing 10, 15 miles an hour longer than me. A cop right behind them, thinking, oh, those guys are going to get pulled over. Cop gets parallel to me, looks at me, starts to slow down, pulls me over, and says, hey, what are you doing around here? My response, I live here. So, unfortunately, when somebody asks me today, what do you identify as white privilege? I show this image. And what's unfortunate about this image is when people say, why do you call this white privilege? Because if you were to replace these pictures and images of me or other people of brown or black color, I tell them I wouldn't have even been in this picture. And if you ask me why, I would have said I probably would have been shot on the steps and would have never made it to the door. And Donald Trump would have been saying, I saved America from black and brown lives and any Black Lives Matter protesters that were trying to take down the Capitol. And Donald Trump would have positioned himself as a hero to the US. And these images for me moving forward give me strength for the fight. So for my Black History summary, be proud of where you come from, be true to yourself, never forget those who led the struggle, educate and inform those that look away from what's right in front of them, do what you can to pay forward and always look out for the future of our children. Never quit, always fight for a better world, and you can accomplish anything if you believe in yourself. Purpose is power. Defend the truth and defeat hate. Thank you for listening.